Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very warm welcome to our secondary RSE curriculum launch webinar. We just had our primary webinar, and it was, mashallah, it was a very good session. So we're hoping that it's going to be equally as exciting for the next hour. My name is Hussain, and I am one of the trustees of the Association of Muslim Schools. We are the organisation that represents Muslim schools in this country, and I will be your host for the next hour. Okay. So the agenda up on your screen for today, but as always, we start with this very special event in the name of the Almighty, without whom nothing is possible. And we send our salutations of peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For our webinars, we've had nearly 400 registrations, and I am delighted to welcome you all on behalf of the Association of Muslim Schools today. We have leaders from schools, governors, trustees, teachers, school advisors. We've got representatives from mosques around the country, madrasa leads, lecturers, parents, and many others. We have representations from our member schools, from non-member schools, from mosques around the country, from madrasas, training providers, various foundations and organisations that are providing Islamic education around the country. So just to start off with some housekeeping, all delegates will be muted for this session, but we do ask that you post any questions on the chat. We will try to respond to those. Just bear with me, I believe we might be having some technical issues. Brother Abdul, am I being heard by... Oh, okay, right. So it might just be the sister who posted there. Jazakallah Maulana for that. So I think we've had a very tight session in the primary. We did expect that. So it may not be possible to answer all of your questions, but I promise you we will be looking at all the questions that are put on the chat. We will be responding to these after the event in various ways, and I'll share that with you shortly. The webinar today will be recorded, and so it will be available for you to watch again on YouTube, and again details of how you can access that will be sent after the event. There's lots more about post-event activity for our member schools, for other organisations that are here today. So hopefully, inshallah, I'll be sharing that with you. So the agenda is to provide you with some background information about the journey that we've had to today. And then we will be sharing with you our RSE curriculum and the next steps. What's happening after today? What can you expect from us here at the AMS? To get started, I am delighted to introduce to you a very important person in our organisation. He is our chairman, and he has been absolutely instrumental in the work that has happened so that we are at this point today. He has been very, very keen for our schools, for organisations to be provided with the support that they need to be able to ensure that they are meeting statutory requirements, that we are meeting the needs of our community, and he has invested a huge amount of time into this. So without further ado, Brother Ashfaque, over to you.
Jazakallah, Sister Hasina. All that she said, may Allah inshallah be pleased with us. Sister is mashallah praised me with things that I'm incapable of. Assalamu alaikum, my dear respected brothers and sisters, my dear colleagues. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to our webinar and thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule. I know it's a working day and it's in the middle of the working day and you're facing huge challenges, including COVID. I first of all pray that you're all safe and best of health and iman. For those who have been going through this very difficult period, an incredibly challenging period of our lives, I would say, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you ease, patience, tawakkul. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Ameen. Secondly, for those who are participating in an AMS event for the first time, because we've got colleagues along the various different sectors and spectrums who joined us today, I want to reassure you that you're in safe hands. The association is an organization that has been in existence since 1992, set up by a famous Muslim Yusuf Islam, formerly known as Cat Stevens. It is currently managed by qualified and experienced educationists who are in many accounts leaders within their own areas. We're also the only Muslim body in the UK which is recognized by an Act of Parliament, and also is a voice at the Department for Education in all aspects of the Muslim education spectrum. That includes state schools. For many of us, if not all of us, today's webinar could not have come soon enough. In fact, we've had multiple requests for this type of event to take place. The event is encapsulation of days, weeks, months, years of research, meeting, lobbying, and to name a few of these activities that have taken place. I first of all thank my colleagues who've invested a huge amount of time, especially Sister Hasina and her team, for working tirelessly to make this happen, last of which was way past midnight last night. For me personally, I'm very proud to be leading such an organization at a time when so many of our schools are united in upholding what is dearest to us, which is our morals and our values. Together, we are best positioned to equip our young generation to meet the challenges of the future of our post-COVID world. I hope you enjoy the event and look forward to seeing you all in our future events. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to you all.
Oh, Jazakallah, Brother Ashfaque. So Brother Ashfaque has told you a little bit about the work that we do, and I'm just going to build on that a little bit. We are currently serving over 50,000 children in our member and non-member schools with the work that we do. A little bit now about why we got involved in the RSE journey. The AMS actually is part of a consultative body of all faith groups at the Department for Education, and we are provided with developments and updates that affect our schools. The AMS has and takes the opportunity to represent your views and the views of non-member schools to the Department for Education and other relevant stakeholders. So when the AMS was presented with the changes to the statutory guidance, the AMS chose to be part of the consultative process and the strategic review, and in doing so represent the views of our member schools and the wider community to Sir Ian Bocum, who led the review that took place. The AMS was then invited to be part of the RSHE steering group and a separate curriculum group, and we have been an active member of both and continue to be, to ensure that we have proper representation of the views and concerns of members, with the ambition of ensuring that the statutory requirements support the ethos of our schools and the wider community. We are now working with the curriculum group to ensure that some of the materials that you've seen today, and of course we'll be working on more of these, are suitable for our schools and others, but will be accredited. So we will be embarking upon an accreditation process with the Department for Education to ensure that our materials are recognised, not only to meet the statutory requirements, but they are suitable for all organisations as well as our member and non-member schools. So the work that we've done in this regard is far-reaching, as well as serving the needs of independent Muslim schools. We are keen to work with our state-funded Muslim schools, state schools that have a majority of Muslim children on their roll, with parents and wider community organisations. So the aims of the project have been to provide a well-written resource, and you're going to get a glimpse of that today, for both primary and secondary member schools, which will enable them to meet the statutory guidance. For all stakeholders, including non-member schools and state schools in the community, a curriculum that is sensitive to the needs of the Muslim faith, and to support parents and the wider community about what are the features of an effective RSE curriculum. Now we've chosen for our project, as you can see on your screen, to go through three phases. First of these is what we're doing today. So we are sharing with you policies, audit tools, some other documentation that we have produced, as well as a long-term plan. Second part of the process will be the publication of resources that will enable you, if you are leaders of schools or teachers in schools, to deliver in the summer term. So the publication of those resources will come first, and then in the final phase we will be producing material that is going to be suitable for you to teach from the autumn and spring term. So moving on to the next slide. The work that we have planned will provide lesson planning for both primary and secondary schools. For those schools, we aim to provide approximately 100 lesson plans for each phase, and as I've said already, to meet statutory requirements. So that's the work that we're doing now, moving forward. So it leaves me now to move you on to the next part of the agenda, and that is to introduce the RSE curriculum. And I'm delighted to welcome Brother Talal Hussain, who's going to be leading on this next part of the webinar. Jazakallah, brother.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Hasina. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem, amma ba'd. Once again, thank you all for joining this webinar. We hope the first of many regarding relationships and sex education. Because time is limited, I'll be presenting, inshallah, an overview of the documentation and resources we produced, really to do justice to all the material we're sharing with you today. We really needed one full day. Unfortunately, because of the circumstances, we don't have that time. We may well decide, inshallah, in the future that, additional training can, we need additional training, and inshallah this can be arranged. In this presentation, I will share documentation and statutory guidance regarding RSE, examine the process for developing an RSE curriculum, and present an RSE scheme of work. First of all, though, let's just set some context. What's our approach to relationships and sex education? In Surah Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, "And verily you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, are on an exalted standard of character." And in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, "Indeed, in the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you have an excellent example. Whoever has hope in Allah and the last day and remembers Allah often." Somebody once inquired of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, "How much of your time do you spend in worshipping?" He replied, 24 hours. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was the best of all in character and conduct. And he presented to us a practical way of life, of how to conduct ourselves and live our lives. We have a complete way of life. Our approach then to RSE has to be from the example set by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our approach to RSE has to be positive and prudent, and in accordance with Islamic principles and values. It has to emphasize the central importance of marriage, of family life, and of course it has to acknowledge that all pupils have a fundamental right to be respected in whatever household they come from. And our RSE curriculum has to prepare our children for life in modern day Britain and all the challenges that brings with it. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the statutory guidance and documentation produced by the Department for Education. For those of you that are not, for those who may have looked at the guidance some time ago, I'll just give you a brief overview of what's being published. Let's start with the policy paper from June 2019. Key messages from this: relationships education to be compulsory in both primary and secondary from 2020, sex education in secondary but not primary, and the right of withdrawal from sex education in secondary but not from science lessons. Next, the government response FAQs, a really important document, this one. Open this up. Points from this document. Schools that are not ready to teach the subjects or unable to meet the requirements should aim to start preparation as soon as possible by at least the start of the summer term 2021. So by summertime 2021, we should be ready to deliver. Next point from here: does the new relationship education RSE curriculum take account of my faith? Just have a look at this sentence. In all schools, when teaching these subjects, the religious background of pupils must be taken into account when planning teaching, so that topics are appropriately handled. And for our schools, our member schools with a religious character can build on the core required content by reflecting their beliefs in their teaching. And just at the bottom here, several faith organizations produce teaching materials that schools can use. So the messages from this document, the message is really quite clear. We can and we should teach the content from an Islamic perspective. Moving down, something that concerns a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of people. Will my child be taught about LGBT relationships? So secondary schools should cover LGBT content in the RSE teaching. RSE teaching should meet the needs of all pupils, whatever they develop in sexuality or identity. This should include age-appropriate teaching of different types of relationships in the context of the law. So, age appropriateness, that's going to be the key thing for us. When I share the content with you in a moment, you'll see that the content that the government requires us to teach by the end of secondary school. The content is not split into year 7, year 8, year 9, it's by the end of secondary school. So it's going to be up to us to decide which content goes where. When is it age appropriate to deliver this content? That was that document, so please have a read of that one. The next one, the most important document, is the statutory guidance from June 2019, updated July 2020, which you should be familiar with. And if you're not, then please take some time out to read this. Again, I'm not going to go through this in great depth. I'm just going to pick out some key points. At the end of this presentation, when you receive the slides and the links, so inshallah you'll be able to, if you don't know how to access, once you get this PowerPoint, you should be able to click on the link and you'll be there, inshallah. Okay, so key points from this document then. If I just move down to page, let's have a page 8, yeah, point 5. Again, just emphasizing something that I just talked about. Schools are free to determine how to deliver the content set out in this guidance in the context of a broad and balanced curriculum. So it's up to us, this is an important point, it's up to us as schools that we have to deliver the content, but it's up to us how we go about delivering it. Emphasizing which points of view, with which narrative. When I share some published schemes with you in a moment, what you're going to see is that every scheme has a particular perspective and a particular narrative. So it's critical that we are aware of these narratives that are out there, and equally critical is that when we deliver RSE, we deliver it with a particular perspective and a particular narrative. Okay, moving down to point 11, point 13 here. Let's have a look at point 13, developing a policy. All schools must have in place a written policy for relationships, education, and RSE. Schools must consult parents in developing and reviewing their policy. So the question is, have consultations taken place? Have they in our schools? Have we done consultations? If we have, brilliant. If not, I'll be presenting some consultation templates later on in this presentation, how to consult with parents, how to consult with staff, how to consult with students. One important point for us to think about is that 5%, maybe 5 to 6% of Muslim children go to Muslim schools. What about the remaining 95%? How are we catering for them? So if you have parents who have joined us today who have got children in state schools, how involved are you in the consultations at your school? How are you ensuring the school's RSE provision is meeting the needs of the community? And this is an important point. I mean, I mentioned it before in FAQs, but when I scroll down here to points 19, 20, and 21, that point again, this point here again, in all schools, when teaching these subjects, the religious background of all pupils must be taken into account when planning teaching. So parents need to be involved in the process, and they must be taken into account. Or is it being taken into account? It's something for us, for us, to be honest, our schools, in particular, this point is pertinent for our schools. In particular, schools with a religious character may teach the distinctive faith perspective on relationships. The balanced debate may take place about issues that are seen as contentious. So for us then, for Muslim schools, distinctive faith perspective and is reflective of the law. What does it mean for us? We need a full scheme of work which has got a particular narrative, an Islamic narrative, Islamic perspective, and it's balanced and open up debate. That's what we need. That's what we take from this guidance. And moving on, if we move down to, let's have a look at something I mentioned before, LGBT, point 37. Schools should ensure that all the teaching is sensitive and age appropriate in approach and content. Schools are free to determine how they do this. But LGBT content should be taught at a timely point as part of this area of the curriculum. So again, age appropriateness comes up again. Different schemes will have different perspectives. Our scheme, inshallah, is planned with age appropriateness in mind. Again, with any scheme, including ours, the school has to take the scheme and take ownership of it and adapt it to the needs of the school community, especially the pupils, the students at the school, adapting it to their needs. And that's something that you have to do once you receive this our scheme. Moving on, governors, point 13. Point 38, the quality of provision is subject to regular and effective self-evaluation. So governing body members need to be on board, need to be ratifying the policy, ratifying the scheme, ensuring that the evaluation is taking place in provision, If you have not done that to date, I'll be sharing with you a self-evaluation tool. I'll share two tools with you. One is self-evaluation that you can do yourselves as leaders and governors. And the second is an audit that you can ask AMS to come in and do an audit for you. Once we get to page 20, we start to look at the content. Now, it's important that secondary schools are aware of what is required by the end of primary, because a secondary content builds upon the primary content. So in primary, the different areas, the different sections, families and people who care for me, caring friendships, respectful relationships, online relationships, and being safe. That's primary. When we get to secondary, the content is much more dense, and as mentioned here, it's in addition to the content in primary. So what are the different sections for secondary? Well, we've got families, for our children to know about committed, stable relationships, how they contribute to human happiness, the importance of marriage, its legal status, and other long-term relationships, the characteristics of these. Then it goes on to talking about parents, the role of parents in ensuring successful, happy children, in raising successful, happy children, and looking at trustworthy information. So that's the section on families. Respectful relationships, including friendships, positive and healthy relationships, conflict reconciliation, resolution, looking at practical steps to improve relationships, stereotypes about religion, race, sexual orientation, disability, and so on. Looking at bullying. Before that, actually, there's respecting people in society. And for us, that's really important as Muslims. Our children grow up with respecting their elders, their parents, the teachers, people in authority, respecting them, and being tolerant to other people's beliefs. Bullying and the responsibilities, for example, for bystanders, what's their responsibility? Then there's coercion and consent, sexual harassment, and violent behavior. Start to look at that in the context of relationships. Then online and media, start to look at staying safe online, risks about being online, posting things online. We're at that situation now, unfortunately, where young children, teenagers, are posting material which is inappropriate. And once it's posted, it's out there, it's very difficult you can't get it off. Then there's a whole point about harmful content, pornography, how this distorts attitudes towards relationships and how to sexual behavior. So the whole section on pornography. And then, to be honest, something which is, again, unfortunate, sharing and viewing indecent images of children and generating. Then there's a objective on data generation and sharing and using online. So there's a lot of material there which is difficult, but to be honest, we have to deal with it because it's out there and our children are exposed to this kind of stuff, so we have to deal with it. Next section on being safe looks at exploitation, FGM, forced marriage, honor-based violence, domestic abuse, coercion, consent, sexual consent, what does that look like? And consent in general is including online. And then the section about intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health, positive aspects of one-to-one intimate relationships, the choices we have in making, the choices we can make in terms of our sexual relationships, reproductive health, fertility, and then there's an important one about the choice to delay sex, chastity, delaying sex, intimacy in marriage. I mean, that's our perspective, isn't it? that we want to push this narrative, that our Islamic narrative, which is yes, that this can take place, healthy, happy relationships within marriage. Then moves on to pregnancy and miscarriage, abortion, HIV, AIDS, and which is sexually transmitted diseases. Looks at alcohol and drugs and this relationship and its impact on sexual behavior, and then sexual health. So that's the content. That's the content. The key point here is that this content, how is it going to be mapped into a scheme of work, and how is it going to be presented with which narrative? And I'll touch upon that in a moment, inshallah. Next, we've got some guidance. I mean, it says primary. There isn't a second one. Secondary. There's not a secondary meant to go with this. There's only a primary version, but it's worth secondary schools having a look at this, because it says the same principles apply whether it's primary or secondary. This document talks about parental engagement and why we need to do it, what must we do, and why we need to do it, and specifically around engagement, around relationship education, and looks at some case studies for that. So that document is definitely worth looking at. Finally, this document here about leaflets for parents. A lot of parents are understandably worried, confused. There's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So, you know, it's important our parents understand the facts. So if we just, it's a document produced by the DFE, is a really good document. It's about relationships and sex education. It talks about health education, which independent schools are not required to deliver, but really we should be delivering all of this, and I'm sure most of us are. And the right to withdraw our children from sex education. Now, again, we should be producing. Our parents should be so comfortable and confident in our material that they want us to be dealing with these issues, rather than saying, no, I'm going to withdraw my child, my daughter, my son from the lessons. That's not an option. Ignorance is not an option for us. You know, we need to understand the issues out there. We need to tackle them sensitively in an age-appropriate way with an Islamic narrative. And that's what we have to do. Okay. So moving on then, that was just a brief overview of the guidance and documentation out there. I strongly recommend you spend some time to go through these, inshallah. Like I said, we'll be sending these PowerPoint slides to you after the webinar, inshallah, and you can click on the links and get those documents. Why do we need to produce a high quality resource for RSE? Surely that's apparent from the documentation we've just reviewed, and we need to have this there. We need to have a scheme with a real, like I said, age appropriate, with a clear narrative, and meeting the needs of our parents and community. We need actually an RSE resource that is of high quality. It's got to stand out, really to stand out as a high quality resource. It needs to be faith-based, Islamic narrative, and it has to be sound from an Islamic perspective. That's why our resource, when we have a process of scholars checking the content. It's got to meet statutory and legal requirements, of course. It needs to tackle, like I've said, the challenges our children are facing up growing up in this country. Can't ignore the issues. We have to prepare them for these and deal with them. And it should be a resource that our parents and the community feel confident that the content is being taught in a manner that they agree with. So what's out there then? I mentioned before that there are public schemes out there, and with particular narratives and particular perspectives. For Muslim schools, we did ask you. There was we requested some feedback, and a lot of you, mashallah, sent back responses about the type of resources you're using. And you mentioned these resources I'm going to share with you. If you are using any published resources at the moment, you really need to make sure you understand the narrative out there. let's have a look at Jigsaw then. This is a lesson plan from Jigsaw, and this is aimed at ages 15 to 16. Let's have a quick read of their objectives, the learning intentions. Jigsaw has decided that this is important. They've taken the content into a narrative. This is important for them. The next slide is really quite interesting for me when I was looking at the lesson plan. And that was an introductory slide to the lesson, and the second one was really interesting. What do you notice? What I noticed was the Muslim male with a hat. I found that quite interesting. This resource by Jigsaw is well presented, a clear narrative, and it opens up debate. What debate does it open up? That anyone can be LGBT, including those from faith perspective. Looks like we've got a Hindu woman there, and including the Muslim male with the hat and the beard. Here's a lesson plan from Agenda, and this is, again, have a read of the section on gender identity, especially the final sentence. Feelings about gender identity start early, around the ages of 2 and 3. So they've got a clear narrative, a thread which runs through the whole scheme. In terms of age appropriateness, again, this is a primary for primary schools. What is puberty? A lesson in year 4 by Discovery. What's age appropriate? Some schools may decide year 4 is fine for this. Some schools, I've even heard of some schools saying year 8's too early. No, I don't think year 8's too early, but you have to decide what's age appropriate. We have to meet the needs of our children. So, in conclusion, then, it's important to understand that all schemes are developed with particular perspectives and narratives. It's crucial that we have a scheme out there that presents the narrative from an Islamic perspective and is age appropriate. Okay, so we've looked at the DFE guidance and documentation. We've looked at the reasons we need to have an RSE scheme. Now let's have a look at our resources, the resources that we've developed. And these documents, will be shared again with you after the webinar, inshallah. And at this point, it's important to acknowledge and thank the Catholic schools, Catholic Education Service, who have, with whom we've collaborated closely and given them, and who supported us in developing these materials, and also the PSAT Association, whose resources and materials have been really helpful for us to work with. Okay, so at this point, it's going to be a little bit fiddly for me, so just please bear with me in terms of opening up each document and closing. So I'll just have to just share my. Give me a moment to just move things around a little bit. I'm just going to open up this document first. Okay, so in terms of our resources, I'm going to go through these documents with you. Firstly, what the stages to developing an RSE curriculum. We'll go through the eight steps that we've identified. We'll look at a model RSE policy that we produced, which you need to adapt. We'll look at a governing body audit, and then we'll look at the consultation I've talked about, staff, students, and then we'll move on to the scheme of work itself. So let's go through these then. Again, apologies, it's going to be really brief. You can have a look at it in detail later on. So first of all then, we'll have a look at a good practice in developing a school relationships and sex education policy. The 8 steps I've talked about. What do we need to do? Step 1, review existing policy and practice. Get feedback from the pupils about about the current provision. Step 3, feedback from staff, parents, and wider community regarding the current provision. Step 4, drafting policy changes or the policy itself. And then step 5 is the important one, the consultation phase. You've got your policy, you've got your schemes of work, you've got your medium-term objectives. You need to be consulting with pupils, with parents, with staff, governors, local scholars, community. Once a consultation phase has been done, there needs to be ratification by the governing body, then there needs to be dissemination. Everyone affected by it needs to get the material. Step 7 needs to be implementation, making sure that staff are prepared, CPD, and support. And then step 8, monitoring and evaluating the implementation of the policy. So those are the steps towards developing good practice. Sorry, let's have a look at our governing body audit for monitoring relationship with sex education. This is for governors to have a look at. Policy has been developed, has been ratified. Does it have an Islamic perspective? Is it shared? Is there a designated governor to monitor RSE? Are parents and carers regularly made aware of how RSE is taught? Have staff been given time to develop staff development? Sharing this. Next, then, let's have a look at the model policy. Model policy, you need to adapt this. So as you go down, there's lots of edits, sections on editing this. It introduces a policy, there's a rationale behind it, Islamic perspective, looks at values and virtues, about what's important for us. It's important that we understand the Islamic perspective on sexual relationships, about marriage, about fidelity in relationships. It's important we talk about sexual gratification, about chastity, all these things. These are our perspectives, and also contraception, sexually transmitted diseases. We need to deal with all these issues, and we mentioned that here. And the policy also looks at how to deliver the content, the role of parents and carers, and the controversial and sensitive issues. That was a policy. In terms of consultations, then we've got consultation for staff. It can be done through a questionnaire, but I would say do it with the focus group, have a training day, half a day, at least with the staff. Look at all the resources, give them this questionnaire, and get them to really think about the responses in terms of the RSE provision we have at the school. Pupil consultation, the way we've done this one is just based on PSHE resources, look at, do a lesson on looking at what children understand, what our students understand about RSE provision, and then for them to look at the actual RSE, the RSE provision that we're going to deliver, get them to feedback on this, do a critique on it, and the things that they might find difficult for them to share those. And after that, there's also a parent consultation. This, to be honest, there's a lot of guidance on this here about how to do parent consultations. I would suggest in a letter out to the parents, a sample letter included, and doing a parent workshop. And there's a parent workshop plan there about how you would do the workshop and the things to talk about with our parents. So those are the kind of documents around the scheme of work in terms of consultation, in terms of the audits, and the RSE policy. In terms of the scheme of work itself, right, so for our scheme of work then, secondary scheme of work, what have we done? What we've done is we've taken the content and mapped it into a long-term scheme of work where we felt that certain things need to be in certain year groups. Now, there's a reason why some things have to be in year 11, we felt, or year 10. Some of you might think, oh, actually, you know, concepts and laws, for example, in year 8 regarding coercion of forced marriage, that should be later. But there's a reason why it's in year 8, because not all the content can be in year 9 and 11. You're going to struggle with all our commitment in terms of what we have to teach and giving everyone a broad curriculum. Trying to do a mapping exercise is quite difficult. We have done it, alhamdulillah, you know, we've done it. Our focus group has done this, mashallah. Again, this is an opportunity for you to look at this. You're more than welcome to change things around and fit them where you think that they should go and when you're going to deliver them. So we've taken the content, mapped it into a long-term overview. From that long-term overview then, we've gone to look at, we've elaborated on each particular objective and what that means. So for example, if we just have a look at Autumn 2 in year 7, families, we start to look at marriage there. What's our narrative on marriage? So first of all, we're looking at what marriage is, including its status. So when we've been looking at writing this lesson, what did we say? We want to look at the cultural and historical perspectives on marriage. Traditionally, how did people get married? And in the West and across the globe, what cultural practices exist now in the world? What's the difference between in terms of nikah ceremonies? Are they registered, unregistered, consequences of each? Important for us to know this. You know, the importance of marriage in Islam, that marriage is a choice and must be freely entered into. So we started to look at that in year 7. As we move on into year 8, we're going to come back, and year 9 we start to look at revisiting marriage again. So summer term 2 in year 8, we start to look at intimate and sexual relationships and the role and purpose of marriage in Islam, characteristics of positive intimate relations between husband and wife, why some people choose to have intimate relationships outside marriage, the healthy one-to-one relationships are built on key values of mutual respect and gratitude. So that's how we mapped out the objectives for each year group. Yeah, and there's a reason why year 11 there's less content, and in year 10, because by spring term 2, GCSE examinations are going to start, and the students won't be there. And same for year 10, GCSEs will start. So that's the scheme of work, long-term scheme of work with the medium-term plans. We want you to give us feedback, and again, as we're working with this document, inshallah, every scheme of work evolves and adapts, and we'll take your feedback on board and inshallah work with this. Let me just move on to looking at back to my PowerPoint. So I just mentioned about families. Families and marriage. I talked about in year 7 marriages. Here's another example in year 8. So being safe, concepts and laws regarding coercion and forced marriage. So what do we want to look at? Again, we're going to touch upon cultural and historical perspectives on marriage again. We'll have a look at the differences between arranged and forced marriage. But because there's still some students might have a stigma around arranged marriage. Do they understand what arranged marriage means? What's forced marriage? What's the difference? What to consider when choosing a spouse? It may seem at first glance that this is slightly out of place in terms of the objective over there, but it builds upon, again, the things that we want to look at. What should we look at as Muslims? We should look at when we get married. Is it just about looks or wealth? Or should we be considering God consciousness, piety, character? Should these be considerations for us? And then, of course, legal and Islamic perspective on coercion and forced marriage. So please have a look at the long-term and medium-term plans, spend some time on them. If we need to do another session, inshallah, we can do that, where we go in real detail about looking at how the mapping exercise is taking place and with what narrative we've mapped out the medium-term objectives.
Brother Talal, I wonder if I could just interrupt you for a minute. I'm very aware that we are running out of time, but we've had a question that's been posted on the chat. Now, our responses to the questions will come after the event because we are so short on time. But there's a question that came up and I just want to address it if I may. Could you just go back to the slide where you've got the overview of our units from 7 to 11?
Okay, let me just...
Because the question has been asked about where do we teach these units? Now, these are the units that need to be covered. Colleagues, what you need to do is have a look at this template and say, right, we are already teaching, if we look at year 7, spring 2, we are already looking at the rights and responsibilities and opportunities online. We are doing that in our ICT or computing curriculum. We are already teaching it as part of Safer Internet Day. So that part actually is covered. And I think this would be your starting point, that where are these things already being covered? When we look at forced marriages in year 8, for example, do we have a time in the year when we teach our pupils about this topic as an annual event? So if these things are already being covered, it's just for you to sit down and look at and just build in what it is that you're not doing, and then in order to ensure that statutory requirements are met. This, as Brother Talal says, is an overview that we are sharing with our schools and other organisations, but it really is up to you how and for how long. One of the questions that we've had on the chat is, how long do we teach these topics? Really, the new inspection framework talks about what is it that children need to know. So some of these topics may just take a fortnight to cover, and some of these will take 8 weeks to cover. So really it will depend on the needs of children in your school. And inshallah, bi'iznillah, later on we're going to do some more training sessions on this, because this is the type of thing that inspectors will want to know. Fantastic, you've got an RSE curriculum, but how do you meet the needs of your children? Well, we only spend 2 weeks on this because children learn about these topics in year 7 and 8, but they don't get a chance to learn about this topic, so we spend much more on this. Okay, Jazakallah Brother Talal, I just thought I would just answer that question.
Jazakallah, Tina, that was really, really important. And inshallah, like as Sister Sina is saying, as I said, it's up to you how you decide to meet the requirements of the statutory content. From our side, what we will do is, sorry, I seem to have lost my cursor for some reason. Okay, I've lost my cursor for some reason. Oh, here it is. Let me just do one moment. We'll just try again. Okay. We've done that one. Okay, from our side though, we will be giving you lesson plans to go with those objectives. Again, if you feel that you need to do much more than what we give you, alhamdulillah, you know, that's something for you to think about, but we will give you lesson plans to go with. Then here's a sample lesson plan I'm going to share with you. And this is a lesson plan on respectful relationships, including friendships. Alhamdulillah, we've worked with some people from Colonial, actually, school who have supported us with this. School, Canada School, they supported us with this development lesson. This is a lesson on building on relationships, respectful relationships, including friendships. And the lesson format, all our lesson formats follow a 4-step approach: engagement, exploration, explanation, and elaboration. So for this particular lesson, you've got the objectives, the outcomes. You've got the structure of the lesson, the 4 different elements of it. In this particular lesson, we look at the qualities of a good friend and friendships. There's a hadith on friendships, looking at different hadith, multiple hadith on what it means. What does friendship mean from from an Islamic perspective in Hadith, what does Rasulullah mention? Looks at healthy friendships from 10 tips, a video showing 10 tips of that. And then there's conflict in friendships and how these overcome these. So that was a really brief, really, for me, too quick, to be honest. But alhamdulillah, because of the time constraints, we, as best as we can, we've gone through the policy development and consultation documents. We've looked at the governing body and external audit templates, and we've just touched upon the scheme of work overview, the long-term overview, the medium-term plans, and the sample lesson plans. So, Jazakallah khair for your time. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'll hand over to Sister Hasina once more.
Okay, Jazakallah, Brother Talal. As Brother said, we really needed to give you much more time on this. Very aware of the busy lives that we all lead, but we really wanted to share with you the work that the association has done, the support that we are providing you with, and we will continue to provide you with in the weeks and months ahead. From your responses to our survey, a number of you have indicated that you may have already written a draft policy or undertaken a consultation with parents. And we hope that the information today has helped to provide some clarity, some next steps, or even provide food for thought. For those of you who are at the very beginning of this journey, we hope that the session will provide you with lots of things to think about and documentation that's going to help you to move forward. If at this moment in time you are feeling overwhelmed, the message from us here at the AMS is that please know that the resources that have been shared today are going to be freely available to you. We will be sending them out to your email contact details that we've received. They will be uploaded onto the AMS website, and there's going to be lots more to come. So support is there, is the key message to you all. In terms of our next steps, we've had the launch event today, which I've subhanAllah been delighted to be part of, and the feedback that we've had from the first session, and I can see the messages coming up on the chat. It really has been really worthwhile for us to hear your words of support. The release of the launch events obviously will come out to you today, or by Monday, sorry, at the latest. It's been a slight change to when we're sending out those materials, as well as the YouTube link. Some of you have asked a question, will this be available? Yes, absolutely, it will be, so you'll be able to watch this again and go through it with staff in your schools or organisations. A question has been asked about the lesson plans and about their release. So Brother Talal showed you an example of a lesson plan today, or a number of lesson plans. We will be sharing some lesson plans with our schools, so you get a sample of those, and the publication of the planning for the summer term is February 2021. So Brother Talal mentioned earlier on in his session that we have a statutory requirement to be teaching the new guidance by April 2021. So bearing that in mind, we will be releasing the lesson planning for that term by February 2021 to you all. And by June 2021, you will have, inshallah, bi'iznillah, the planning for autumn and spring term, so that you will have in your hands the lesson plans that you need to deliver for a full academic year, whether you're teaching in the primary or you have responsibility for the secondary phase. So that's the timeline that we have proposed, and we hope, inshallah, that we will meet. Moving on, please, to the next slide. I've mentioned it already, but our journey really doesn't stop here. If we could just go back to the slides. Okay, so our journey doesn't stop here in terms of our support. Now, next one. Yeah, okay. So we have a team of people working on this around the clock, I promise you, because really it is such an important piece of work for us. We know how important it is for you. We know the anxieties it has caused and the worries and concerns. And as I've mentioned, for those of you that were here at the beginning of the webinar, our chairman really has embraced this to give everything that he can to it to ensure that our schools are supported as far as we can support them. So regular updates will come through throughout this period, and we will be providing a dedicated page on our AMS website where you will find a whole host of information to support you, whether that's you planning a parent consultation. We're actually finalising at the moment a PowerPoint presentation for both primary and secondary that you just need to tweak and then share with parents at the consultation. So a prepared presentation for you, as well as all the other documents that have been shared today. There will be lots of others. We will have FAQs. A lot of the questions that you've shared today, we've not been able to answer. I promise you after this event, we will be looking at all of them. We've probably had in the region of about 120 questions in the two sessions that we've delivered. And we will, as I said, be looking at each of them and sharing our responses to them. And you will have that available to you. Moving forward, in terms of staff training and support, there's lots more to come, and we will again be providing you with that, as well as an audit should schools require it. Lots more to come on that. Now we can go on to the costs. So the association has invested a considerable amount of money in the work that's gone on, and a contribution will be required from schools for the lesson plans that we will publish. So everything that's going to come to you today, everything that's going to be on the website, all of that is completely free. There is no cost involved in any of those things. But in terms of the bank of lesson plans that are going to be made available for both the primary and the secondary, we will be offering these at £175 if the purchase is made by the 31st of December. After that date, the standard price will apply, which is £225. If you are an AMS member, then we will apply a 25% discount. So should you place a request, and we've already had an email this morning after the primary webinar for the resources, the full package of material, then you can purchase the lesson plans for just over £131 if you are a member. And we will be providing a lesson plan for each of the objectives that we wish to deliver. So that's the costs that are involved in the purchase of the lesson plans. Just a reminder about post-event activity. You will receive an email from us from Monday. That will give you the documents from today and links to a lot of the documents that Brother Talal has mentioned. We will be also providing you with the link for the recording of today's session, so you'll be able to go back and watch it again. And we will also be sending you an event evaluation, so we can feel and hear what you had to say about our event and be able to plan our next steps. Just leaves me to say, it's been a real privilege to be part of the project so far, to have been your host for both the primary and the secondary webinar today. We have lots more to share with you, lots more to give you. we will, as I said, be answering your questions, but should you feel that there are things that you want to know, there is advice and support that you'd like, please email us at admin@ams-uk.org, and we will be responding to your questions. We hope, inshallah, to have a dedicated email address very, very soon, just for our RSE, because we know that the journey is just beginning. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. We really hope that you found it beneficial, and I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. Jazakallah khair.